Hello, I'm Cormac. You're listening to Queerly Beloved, supported by Amazon Music. In this series, I invite DJs and musicians, friends and allies from the LGBTQ+ community to talk about music, queerness, and anything else that shapes their unique story. It is my hope that in sharing our individual experiences, we can learn and grow and focus on our similarities rather than our differences. You can find all of the music mentioned in today's episode and each episode at the link in the episode description. Ann Foxman is a leading queer DJ. She is also a very talented producer and one of the original founding members of Hercules Love. What was remarkable for me in this chat was that although we grew up in very different places, Hawaii and Northern Ireland, we had such similar connections and relationships with music. So please enjoy this episode of Queerly Beloved, where I'm chatting with Ann Foxman. I would ask you to introduce yourself and maybe tell the listeners, who you are and how you identify and what you do.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ann Foxman, and I'm a DJ and a producer and electronic music artist for a long time now. I identify as a lesbian. I'm based in Brooklyn, and I will be partly based in Berlin now as well.
Which is great.
It's great, yeah. I'll be getting to do the back and forth.
Where did you grow up, Kim?
I grew up in Hawaii. I was born and raised in Hawaii, in Honolulu, in this very lush green valley called Manoa Valley.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a great childhood. I was able to walk to waterfalls every weekend. And
wow.
I'm very much a island girl at heart. And I sort of was introduced to electronic music while I lived in Hawaii. It was the tiniest little scene. But a friend had sort of brought me into it. And I actually got a job at an all-ages nightclub while I was still working in high school there.
Uh-huh.
That was a loophole for me because my mom was quite strict. And I used to have to tell her I'm sleeping at Tiffany's house tonight so I could stay out late. So then I got smart and I got a job at this club. I was bartending, but I was too young to serve alcohol, of course. So I was making rave smoothies and serving soda. But it was cool. We had some really proper acts roll through the club. D-Light was one of them.
Oh.
And Sound Factory played live there as well. So it was actually there wasn't many options. It was the underground rave that happened, the one option. And then there was this one all ages club. And so I got a job at the all ages club. And after that, I went to college in San Francisco. But really it was to rave because I knew that the scene was really popping off there in the 90s. So I moved there and I really dove into that scene there quite hard. And that's when I started collecting records and stuff.
And you mentioned your mom being quite strict. Was the loophole of you getting into the club because you had a job?
Yeah, I was being responsible. I was I have to go to work.
Was your family musical?
Half of the family. So my mom's from the Philippines, and that side of the family is super musical. My dad's side, not so much, but he's a really cool hippie.
Ah, okay. That's a nice mix. Yeah. And did you visit the Philippines? Have you checked out that side of your heritage?
Yeah. I went about 4 times just with my mom and stuff. And then I went to play for my first time in Manila. And it was the first time I went there as an artist. And I was wow, the last time I was here was 30 years ago with my mom.
Wow.
And so it felt really really special, connecting with that side, being able to perform for the first time there and feeling feeling related to the crowd. And it was just yeah, it was really special. And they were like popping off there. It was actually like, it was really cool.
I played a few years ago in Belfast, which is very close, just a few miles from where I was born. And it was a revelation to me because in the years since I left there, and more recently with the focus on queer visibility, and I think with my decision to be more visible, I went there and there was such a celebration in the crowd of me being there, and people were like shouting like very queer positive stuff, and they were using the word queer. I think they were saying like up the queers or something. And my first instinct was to retreat because I think the last time I heard that word in that town, I was probably hiding in a phone box. So it was like this very healing
Oh,
homecoming
that's amazing.
experience somehow of being quite defiant that I didn't need the support of the people I grew up with because I didn't get it. But then when I got it, it really felt like something.
Yeah,
It's
I
very
bet.
powerful.
Super powerful.
Is there like a record that you remember from when you were growing up and, you know, you were a kid running about being a beach kid, bodyboarding?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I was listening to a lot of stuff on the radio at that time, and definitely Technotronics Pump Up the Jam was major for me, especially because I mean it was such a huge dance track. But it was also when I saw Ya Kid K, who doesn't look like your average voice in pop music, you know. They're quite like butch, gay, queer looking. I felt really drawn to that. And I was like, they're badass. Like, I want to be like them, you know? So they were like an icon for me in that way where I felt like I feel like this, you know?
Yeah.
So they were a good representative for someone that was like inspiring me in music, but also visually.
What a great start. Often I ask like about a record from growing up and then a record, you know, that you might have realized your otherness, but it kind of covers both.
Yeah.
And I really remember feeling her as well, but not registering why.
Yeah. I
And
didn't
I mean,
register.
the music, like that album, that first Technotronic album, I still would play a track or two from that. Like, I love that album. I think it's really well produced. It's kind of timeless, some of the stuff.
It's absolutely timeless. I mean, people still play that all the time now.
And she was bossing it.
She was bossing that like presence and yeah, to be like visible like that was really inspiring
Mm.
because it wasn't seen very often, especially by women.
And I read a little bit about Technotronic, and yeah, Kid K, you know, I think in their first video, she didn't feature in it. They used a
Mm-hmm.
model.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, I don't know if it was commonplace. That also happened with Black Box and
Yeah.
Right on Time, where, you know, they didn't feel like the image of the lead singer was marketable enough,
Mm-hmm.
which is like hyper misogynistic.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. And actually, the thing that was like super attractive for us was that.
Exactly. 100%.
Did you come out to your family? Was it a big discussion in your house?
I did come out to my family when I was 18. Actually, it was my dad that asked me. He basically was like, hey, I want to ask you something. Grandma told me that mom told her that she thinks you might be a lesbian. He was like, is that true? And my reaction was I cried because I was so just sort of afraid of what the reaction would be. And he immediately said, like, just so you know I love you no matter what. And what you do in your bedroom is your business. And I just want you to be happy. So he was very, like, very accepting of me. I didn't even have to come out to him. He approached me about it and with support, which I really appreciate. Whatever path I want to take, he's always been like really supportive that that I'm choosing my own path. And he's really like, has like a true hippie heart. So he's very understanding, very open-minded. It was tougher for my mom, for sure, but she's come a long way.
And do you think that was a cultural thing or?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because she's more traditional and conservative, coming from the Philippines. So she had other dreams for me. She's had a really hard time with me just even having short hair, so, and not owning a dress and this kind of stuff. So it was a lot of a longer process for my mom to accept, and it was a slow one, but eventually she and I really have a better connection now because she was able to accept me and be able to talk about it. Really, it took a while.
When I came out to my mom, it really upset things for a long time, for many years. But afterwards, we were really able to have those needed conversations and tell each other we loved each other. And, again, it's that thing of intimacy and connection. Did you have any queer people in your family?
I don't know how close of relatives that they were, but I definitely had some visibly queer representing people at our family reunion in the Philippines. There was actually a drag show, and they do that really well there. But it's interesting because it was always easier to see more like, it was harder to see lesbians than gay men, or effeminate men were more visible, either trans or drag queens, or, so we did have a drag show in our family reunion. And I remember,
That's insane.
it was, yeah. And I don't know, like, our family is so big, my mom comes from a family of, there's like 10 siblings. So there's many, many cousins and distant cousins. And I just remember my grandma standing up, and I don't know if they were my real uncle or not, but I always referred to them as like Uncle Ben. And I remember my grandma standing up and being like, "Oh, Ben, you look beautiful." And they were wearing this amazing red bathing suit and had the smoothest, beautiful legs, and did a dance performance. And at that family talent show, I was pissed because I had to sing "The Greatest Love of All" by Whitney Houston, and I just wanted to break dance with my cousin Maxim. So I kind of like sang the song like on the verge of tears.
Was the song chosen for you?
Yeah, my mom wanted me to sing that song, and I loved Whitney Houston, but that's a big shoes to fill.
And she chose like a bisexual pop star for you to sing. So,
right?
I mean, maybe, yeah, maybe unconsciously she knew more than she knew.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested, this idea of, well, intergenerationality and mentorship. And I feel that very often as queer people, we don't really get that because some people are getting this extra or alternative care from grandparents or from people that they're looking up to, and often we lack that. There's a common theme sometimes of the only queer people we see are on TV, and maybe it's a big drama, or they're the humorous one or the funny one or the tragic one. Or so I'm always interested to know, like, if my guests ever had someone to look up to that was queer, or a role model, I guess.
I didn't really have anyone close that was a role model for me in that way, where I had anyone to really talk to about it. I could tell that my basketball coaches were queer. And so, like, I kind of looked up to them in some way, but I didn't really register why. I was quite drawn to them, of course, but I didn't really realize yet that it's because I related to them. But I could see it now that I'm older.
I think for me, I really dove into music somehow. I dove into the the fantasy personalities and personas of pop stars, and kind of saw some kind of relief or salvation or freedom in that somehow. Fantasy, I guess. I guess it was a fantasy. As queer people, I think we have very special relationships to art anyway, whether it's aesthetics or sound or
Absolutely.
narratives. And I mean, the whole podcast is really about our unique relationship with music. So it's
Yeah, for sure. It was always more acceptable in a way in music. There was a lot more visible play with gender
yeah.
and crossover, more and androgyny, like, for example, Prince,
I mean,
Grace Jones, Madonna. Like, so many people have dabbled in that, and it's always been more acceptable in music towards the even the broader audience.
that's interesting, isn't it?
Sort of the one place where you could really get away with it publicly.
Prince just blows my mind eternally, especially early Prince, and just how much he got away with.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was basically transvestite in
Mm-hmm.
some way. You know, he
Mm-hmm.
was wearing women's clothes, but I don't think anyone really doubted his heterosexuality.
Yeah, exactly.
It was seen as totally understandable.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I mean, the biggest pop star of our lifetime and generation, Michael Jackson, who's always been very questionable visibly for a lot of people, and the stars are able to play with that a lot more.
I read that Prince was supposed to guest on Bad, but he refused
Really?
it in the end because the first line was "Your butt is mine,"
No way.
and he turned it down. He refused. We talked a little bit about you going out and getting your starting clubs, making rave smoothies, which is super adorable. Were you very aware of the music at that time? Were you participating on the dance floor? Were you?
I was participating on the dance floor. I mean, I was raving. Yeah. My very first experience with besides what was on the radio, because that's all we got in Hawaii is information, which was like the 90s club tracks, like Technotronic or Snap, and this whole era of dance pop. But someone in my class went to London. I was a freshman in high school, so I was 15, and he gave me this cassette tape, which was a techno compilation. That was my first introduction to rave music, and I remember it was called 100% Kickin' Techno, and it looked like a detergent cover or something like that. You remember those?
Yeah.
And it had like Messiah.
Oh wow.
And
I love that track.
Yeah, so good. Temple of Dreams. So it was one of these compilations, and he was like, "Oh, there's this whole like movement happening in Europe and UK." And he told me about the rave scene, and I was like, "Whoa!" Like, it seemed also so far away, and I wonder if that will ever make it to Hawaii, you know? And it didn't for a really long time. But what was really funny is I got really into this sound, and I started sort of like trying to find more of it. And I was really into dancing. So I was a dancer, not a professional dancer, but I was really into my school dances. And any time I could get to dance, I was really into it. So we decided, me and my friend who gave me this tape, his name was Clarence, we were sort of like dancing buddies. We would like make dance moves up and stuff. I'd go to his house and we'd like record, like the hot DJ mixes on the radio, and then we would make dance moves to them. Anyhow, we decided to DJ our high school dance. Yes.
I love both of you. Oh my God.
We decided to DJ our high school dance as freshmen, and we didn't know how to DJ. But we convinced the school to let us DJ our high school dance, and nobody else in high school was listening to this music. So it was really funny. We didn't know how to mix or anything. We got like his uncle got like like disco lights and club lights, and we got a whole setup, and we had 2 Discmen.
Uh-huh.
And then we were just playing off 2 Discmen.
So cute.
Not mixing, but playing, trying to like plug in little rave tracks that like our freshman class had no idea what to do with. It was pretty hilarious. So I was pushing the limits.
So that came quite naturally.
It did, yeah. I had no idea that, and then it took years later where then the music finally came to Hawaii.
And were you able to buy records in Hawaii? Because sometimes when places are a bit remoter, it's not so easy
yet.
to buy vinyl.
It wasn't easy to buy vinyl. You could find cassette tapes and stuff. I mean, we were able to buy vinyl, but just pop vinyl. My first record I ever got was for my 11th birthday, and it was JJ Fad's Supersonic. Yeah, my next door neighbor gave it to me, and yeah, I already had loved that track because it was on the radio, but also the cover is just so amazing, and their style and everything. And it was one of the songs I love to dance to at the dances.
I don't feel like that was a big hit in Europe. I feel
really?
Like it was quite a US.
Oh, okay. It was huge in Hawaii.
Maybe it just went over my head, but the trajectory, I mean, I think it's only a year apart, but the trajectory between that and Technotronic is like completely transparent. You can really
totally
see it because, they're totally fierce as well. It's a great track.
It's a great track. That kind of music was huge in Hawaii. It was sort of like this era of radio, hip hop, and dance crossover, and also freestyle was also huge in Hawaii, Latin freestyle music. So, and they're all electronic beats based, actually. So I was always kind of more into drum machine sounds. And so that was kind of perfect to go from that to dance pop into underground dance music.
I love the merge of that. With hip hop is a form of protest music, and then like for it to cross over into like dance pop, there was still that slight edge of like really fucking saying it as it is.
For sure.
It's kind of punk, really.
Definitely. I was also into like breakdancing music, so like Miami bass and freestyle also crossed over. Sort of like music that would pump from lowrider trucks, which was definitely like a scene in Hawaii. Lowrider trucks with tinted windows.
You were way cooler than me. I think you were like effortlessly cool. I was a bit more goth than all of that. I got
that's cool.
Kind of via the synthetic sounding goth of like EBM, and I think it was maybe one of the last Cabaret Voltaire albums, which I think paved a lot of the way for like 9 Inch Nails and things,
Oh yeah, loved that. I definitely got into that. I sort of also explored that whole era as well. It was like my alternatine era.
I definitely had that as well, like of being the town goth, but I wasn't even particularly goth. I just liked The Cure and the Smiths and a bit of EBM. It wasn't like the most goth, but it didn't take a lot to be very different in the town that I grew up in. Is there a track that you remember from those early rave days that you still love? It could be something maybe from a DJ set or something that you heard then.
I mean, there's so many, and I like to inject a lot of these into my DJ sets still. I don't know, one track that I was looking for like literally like so many years was Bassman Twins A1 Love. I remember having it on a mixtape, and for years I was like, what is this track? What is this track? And eventually I found it, like, I don't know, I accidentally found it in a garage sale or something, and I like,
oh wow,
it felt like I hit a gold mine. This feeling where you finally stumble upon a mystery record that like, you know, blew you away. For so many years, that was this like unsolved mystery. Now it's so easy to find tracks, but you would really have to organically come across them then. So this is like one of the tracks that like I used to rave to, and I would just like pop off to. Sometimes I'll still throw that one in. Also, Future Sound of London in general, the whole like Accelerator album was like so massive for me.
It's a great period of music, of that crossover of like electronic music. I always feel like, you know, the dance floor had its space on MTV eventually, and then also the chill out room from raves.
For
Kind of
sure.
snuck in with the Future Sound of London, with the Orb,
Totally.
with Orbital. You know, there was that those things going on. But I got more into the second album, Life Forms. I was a little bit, as I said, you were cooler than me. I was a bit later to the Future Sound of London. But I had Life Forms. I loved that album. But
It's
I know that
great.
people talk more about, I think Life Forms maybe had a track with Liz from the Cocteau Twins or something, with some
Yeah,
edit
yeah.
or some sample. But people talk more about Accelerator.
Yeah, Accelerator was major for me. Also influential in me as exploring music production as well. I was already living in San Francisco at this time, going to college slash just raving. And
What did you study at college?
I first went to art college and I was trying to figure out what I was going to focus on. At first, I started out in photography, and then I stopped going to art college because it was too expensive, and I went to community college and then a state college where I focused on metal arts actually. So I was doing like metal sculptures, and then they got smaller and smaller, and then I was kind of focusing on jewelry for a while. So during my days in San Francisco in like 1995, the scene was so good there. I remember I had met someone out it was the first person I had met that was actually working on electronic music on the production side, on the other side. And I had just been, you know, dancing for years as a diehard raver. And I met someone who was like, I think that they were, I don't know, I wound up having a conversation with them. I was pretty high. And they were talking about making electronic music. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, I actually never really thought about exploring that side of it, you know? And so he invited me to come over and check out his studio and, like, you know, whatever. We became friends, and we actually wound up forming a little 2-man electronic band. That was my first experience. It was like around 1998. And he asked me like, oh, what are your influences that you kind of want to go for? And at that time I was listening to a mixture of rave stuff that I love, but also kind of a little bit more like indie electronic stuff as well. But that's when I got my first drum machine and sampler. And I had my first 2-man electronic band experience.
What were you called?
We were called 2-Bit. And we played like 10
Love it.
shows in San Francisco.
Was San Francisco super fun at that time?
It was so fun. It was definitely my most informative years and my most fun years of going to parties.
And also, like, when I think of it, like, from a very myopic point of view, I love the aesthetics of like late 70s, early 80s San Francisco. And, you know, I'm kind of inspired by that aesthetic sometimes. How was it for like queer women in San Francisco? Was it just as free and open and wild?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's where I really found myself. San Francisco was, at that time, it was very affordable to live, unlike now. And it was just filled with the most, like, the parties had just like the best characters. It was just like such a amazing mixture of people. And that's what I loved about it. And the club space and the underground space was definitely a space where I first felt comfortable exploring my sexuality, as far as like discovering who I was. It was a place that was like acceptable and like cool to explore, you know, being queer or gay or bi. And so, yeah, my first kiss was at a rave in the bathroom. Other than like experimental childhood stuff. My first real queer kiss was in the bathroom. It was a place where you could really be free. But there were, San Francisco was really great because there was such a strong gay queer community there. And there were lesbian bars at the time. There were, you know, it was really a strong scene there. And once I got old enough to go into bars, because before I could get into bars, I was going to raves, warehouses, and under illegal stuff. But when I turned 21, I was able to start going to bars, and I started going to lesbian bars. And then that's sort of where I really found and sort of accepted and embraced who I was.
What was the transfer into New York like? Because they're very different cities.
They're so different. And it was a hard transition for me musically, especially because the scene in San Francisco was like had a very strong sense of community as far as underground dance music, the whole like rave scene, the house heads, also the queer scene there. San Francisco had such a strong sense of community in general within all the scenes. And it was something that I really loved about my time there. And when I moved to New York, I was honestly like really disappointed because it was not in fashion there. And it was sort of like not in when I moved to New York. You know, house music wasn't cool. Raving wasn't cool anymore. And I think it also had to do with trends of, you know, what kind of party favors were going around at the time. That also came into play as well. It was almost like people didn't want to be, you know, looking too vulnerable in New York. It seemed a bit more superficial kind of to me. And that's when I actually started to DJ. Because I couldn't find the music that I wanted to hear, and I didn't care if it was cool or if it was dorky. I wanted to hear the music that I wanted to hear. We had to create something because there wasn't many options. So I had a little party back then when I first moved to New York, and it was a way for me to be able to go out and listen to music that I wanted to hear.
That's pretty cool.
It's cool, but it wasn't cool at the time, but it got cool.
Yeah.
And eventually people came. It was also a queer space, but it was interesting because people came because I had it at this hot spot called The Hole, and it had this like crappy sound system, but it was cool spot because it was very debaucherous and you could get away with anything. So it was really wild, but the people I think weren't necessarily ready for the music that I was offering. But it was such a hot little party that I think people like went along with it, and it was totally packed and crowded. But yeah, it was a tough time for me specifically as a DJ and being queer, because I would get booked for things because I'm gay, and people would book me for that. But then when I would play, I was playing underground dance music, and at that time, especially in the lesbian scene, they would really just kind of want to hear more pop, and it was tougher for me.
Yeah, I remember Mark Moore saying like when he started to play house music in the UK, it used to clear dance floors. Like it didn't connect.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the things that often make the biggest waves, they're not so well received at the start. Or at least I've noticed that, and it's quite exciting. There's like an underdog wave to it. And I wonder sometimes in these hyper times of capitalism where everything becomes a sellable thing and we're given more and more and more of what's popular. And I think sometimes it's harder for things to break through that don't necessarily get received well initially,
Yeah.
you get a lot more of what we supposedly want, but you maybe don't get some of the game changers just as easy.
Yeah, for sure. Also, at that time, there was this really strange no dancing law when I first got to New York.
Was that from
Giuliani,
Giuliani?
yeah. If a establishment, if a bar didn't have a dancing license, you could get fined for dancing, which is so crazy.
Which is just
I can't even help that. Like if there's music on, I will accidentally start moving. It's like
yeah, but movement's like this. Yeah, it's like this essential part of being a human being and
exactly.
accessing rhythm. It's like asking people not to, well, maybe not as extreme as not to breathe, but you're asking for something very primitive and tribal and powerful to not take place, which I guess makes sense in a very oppressive system, which Giuliani did bring
Hmm.
in. Did you watch The Strut? Or, sorry, The Stroll
No, I haven't
on
seen it.
HBO? It's fascinating. I really recommend it. Honey recommended it to me, and it's a documentary made by a queer trans person
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
revisiting the meatpacking district where they worked. Basically, like the girls worked there, and they're talking about like the eradication of well, they're talking about like the trans experience of being trans in New York at that time, and
Hmm.
how, if your gender didn't match your ID, you weren't getting a job. It's fascinating because it's also about the community between
Hmm.
them, and then how things changed, and they go back to visit the meatpacking district. It's quite an emotional watch.
Wow. Yeah, I
I
definitely want
recommend
to
it,
see
but
that.
it talks a lot about Giuliani and his laws. There's a few things I want to unpack. You mentioned party favors. Did you get
Hmm.
involved in much of that in your early rave days?
I did. Yeah. I was always
Good.
a bit more, yeah. I mean, for me, it was very, very life changing. And I was always stayed more on kind of like the hippie side of the whole party favors. I was really into ecstasy and mushrooms and acid and stuff, all the mind expanding ones. I dove pretty full on into that. It was a huge part of my rave experience.
Yeah, I mean, and also those are all heart openers. And I've been sober for many years because I leaned on substances for a very long time. And for more than just fun, I kind of leaned on them as a lifeline.
Hmm.
And that was wonderful until it stopped working. But
Hmm.
I'm interested as well, as queer people, we tend to have more problematic using at times, and
Hmm.
we have more mental health issues.
Hmm.
We have a little bit more stacked against us, and that's not to
Absolutely.
drug shame in any way. I am not anti drugs. They really saved my life. I have a lot of positives to say about my time with them as well.
Hmm.
But I'm always interested to hear our unique experiences around those things, because I think often we have certain experiences with them, and maybe they're not spoken about enough. I think people in
Yeah,
our community sometimes suffer
they do,
around those issues, around those topics.
for sure. I mean, I feel really lucky personally. I always had a really positive relationship with drugs, and I don't know, they've always been inspiring for me, or you
That's
know,
wonderful.
yeah, I've always had a really positive relationship with them. I don't know why, but I do remember, when I was younger, my dad being a hippie, he also explored drugs. He went to like the first Woodstock, and he
Wow.
loves weed and psychedelics and these kinds of things. Also the heart openers. And he told me when I was younger, he said to me like recreational drug use is okay if it's a positive thing for you, but the minute that it becomes not recreational and not fun, that's not okay. And so, him sort of giving me the freedom to explore that and not be judged about it, I think honestly helped me have a good relationship with it. It wasn't necessarily taboo thing.
Your dad sounds so awesome.
Yeah, he's really awesome. He works in superfoods, like with all these like very intelligent adaptogens, and he also just opened a dispensary in Thailand. So he's like he
Oh,
loves his
wow.
herbs. He's always been, best friend in that way, where I'm able to talk to him about stuff and share my experiences, exploring. I've always been able to be honest with him, which has been really, really nice to have.
But it sounds like you had a lot of support at home around your sexuality as well. It sounds like you had like kind
Yeah,
of a solid island there, which I think is very important for any child.
it is. I think for any child to just be able to be open, have someone that they could be open with and honest with, so that you don't have to feel like you need to hide everything, or it's really important.
Yeah.
And I feel really grateful that as especially being a teenager, sometimes you really lose touch with your parents. It wasn't as close with my mom. Like, I wasn't able to be as honest with her, but like I did have my dad, who really like knew who I was, who really knew who I was. And it makes a big difference.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
I feel like for me, my sexuality and my drug use as a teenager were very much hidden.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, they both became quite intertwined. Like my identity and drugs, it kind of became like very intertwined, I think, because they were both in a closet.
Yeah.
So I think that ability to be honest and have a safe space at home is very important in the world.
I think is if you can be honest, it just makes the relationship really special.
Navigating our sanity in a heteronormative world can be a mission.
It can.
We could call it a spiritual practice. We could call it a sanity practice. But do you have things that you do that help you keep your sanity? Maybe just in life, or maybe on tour, or I'm kind of curious to know how you survive, because we all have our ups and downs.
Yeah, we definitely have our ups and downs. And it's true. For me, I like to listen to music that's like relaxing. That's been my new favorite thing. And also spend time in nature, like check in and reset, doing practices that sort of like reset myself, or give me kind of clear things. But yeah, I've been listening to like a lot of chill music, actually, and a lot of like ambient new age, just stuff, that kind of meditation music. Yeah, one of my favorite albums that is kind of like my go-to if I ever need like a moment of like peace, even in a really busy situation or chaotic situation, is this record by Alice Damon called Wind Song. And it was re-released recently, and it's really beautiful. I believe she released it maybe like, I don't know if it was 30 or 40 years ago initially. And then it's been sort of like re-released, and it's been really embraced now. And I just imagine really getting the attention that you deserve, like, so many years later. That must feel really incredible.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful album. She has these really kind of like ethereal vocals on it. There's no beats or anything. It's just like very beautiful. I think it's a brilliant album because even if I'm, let's say, at a festival and it's, I need a break or whatever, I can go find like a little peaceful area, and that album, it sounds good over everything in the background because it can go over everything. For me, it's been like really calming and really, just really peaceful. So that's been the one for me lately, mixed with nature. Very incredible.
I feel like you just shared a little gem with us. I'm going to add that to the playlist that goes with the podcast.
Yeah,
So it's Alice Damon Wind Song. It sounds perfect. To me, it sounds perfect for airports. I'm going to get very
perfect
excited
for
by
airports. Yeah, it's perfect for airports. It's perfect for psychedelic moments, for
lovely
driving, for just makes you really feel relaxed and grounded. But yeah, for me, that, and also nature is huge.
Like there's a field, I'm thinking of a particular field near my aunt's house in Ireland, and when I stand there, I just feel this stillness that I don't feel anywhere else. And I think it just comes from generations of, my ancestors growing up in that area, living in that area. And I wonder what it's like to not be on an island for you. Because island life is a particular vibe.
It's a particular vibe, yeah. And it's interesting because it's a huge part of me. But now I've lived in New York 3 years longer than I've lived in Hawaii.
Okay.
But like that was my growing up. So it's like a huge part of me.
To pull it into the present, is there a record that you're particularly psyched about at the moment that you're playing?
I mean, I think that Rosa Terenzi is absolutely smashing right now.
Yes.
And has been for a while. So I think she's a really inspiring artist for a lot of people in general, but especially being that she's queer, it's really awesome to see her shining.
Yeah, she's definitely out there making waves.
She's making big waves. Good for her.
We love to see it. I will include some of her music on the playlist.
Yeah.
Before we go, Kim, is there anything that you're up to at the moment that we need to know about?
Yeah. So I just finished my first Pleasure Planet LP. And Pleasure Planet is it's like a collaboration band project. It's basically my band project. And that is a very special accomplishment for me because it's the first LP that we've done. And it's the first full-length album in general that I'm on in a really, really long time since my days in Hercules. But this is my project. So it's taken years of organic growth for us to find our sound. And I'm really excited that we have something ready to release. And yeah, it's a really thoughtful, intentful, personal, emotional album. So I'm really excited about that.
That's beautiful. I listen to the EPs and I always love your voice. And it's very interesting to feel the journey. Sorry to use that word.
Yeah.
But, of all the music that we've discussed, I can hear all of those influences in Pleasure Planet. And I can hear, the hip hop thing. I can hear the more ambient experimental thing.
Mm-hmm.
The lyrical thing is also very provocative, a bit like the hip hop thing. It's very beautiful to see you get to realize all of those things within a project. It's great.
Yeah, it's just a whole more organic sound, and I feel like it's a special one for me because I feel my growth as an artist, and I feel really happy about where this album is representing me.
It's very exciting.
Yeah.
I look forward to hearing it, especially now that I know kind of all the stories that have led up to this moment. So it's very beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you so much.
Experience and wisdom. It's very beautiful.
Thank you for inviting me again.
Oh, anytime. Well, I'm going to see you soon, I hope, in Berlin. So we will catch up in person as well.
Oh, yeah, we definitely will.
You've been listening to Queerly Beloved with me, Cormac. You can find the playlist of all the music featured in today's episode in the episode description. And while you're there, please do hit subscribe so you don't miss out on my conversations with other talented people. A big thank you to Michael Lane, my producer, my manager, Melissa Taylor at Tailored Communication, and of course to Amazon Music for their support. Take care of yourself. All the best. Bye.